It's been wet, it's been cold, but today winter is really putting it on. So I thought, what a better time than today to take you outside and show you around our winter garden. Now it ain't always pretty, there's leaves everywhere, it's wet, but I'm going to show you the reality of our winter garden. Good morning, it's Rachel from Bush Edge Homesteading Australia. It's a beautiful winter morning this morning. It did rain overnight and it is absolutely cold this morning, but the sun is out, the birds are going absolutely nuts out here. Even though it's a bit damp out here, it's not raining and the wind isn't blowing like crazy. So I thought, what a good time to go for a bit of a wander around the garden and take you guys with me. Now, I will warn you, it's not pretty in the garden at the moment, even though it is such a magnificent day out here. And that's because in winter, it's not my favourite time to garden. So things get a little bit loose, as you will see. I am not a fan of the cold at all. In fact, I'm out here at the moment in my gummies, in my hoodie, trying to keep nice and warm, because even though it's a beautiful blue sky day, it is absolutely freezing out here at the moment. So anyway, let's start off by taking the ducks out, get them into the garden with me, and then we'll go for a bit of a walk and I'll show you what our winter garden looks like. Oh, they're definitely waiting for me. Oh, yep, that ground's nice and squishy and wet. Hey, ducks. Hey, ducks. Come on. Hey, ducks. Hey, ducks. I love the way they march over to the garden. Make sure I go back and lock the gate so the chickens don't go on adventures too, and so no foxes get in the pen. So I'm going to leave these two to forage around in the garden and eat up all those bugs, of which there is plenty of little snails and things around in the garden at the moment. Winter, they always come on in some numbers, so these guys are perfect. Anyway, let's go and check out a bit more of the garden and I'll show you what things are looking like. Our kitchen garden, veggie patch kind of area is all looking pretty bare at the moment. I don't have an awful lot in our gardens and I've done quite a lot of work clearing out a lot of the summer veg recently. So you'll see kind of in this raised garden bed area, there's not a lot in here. There's a few flowers left over where I've kind of left some nasturtiums in. A couple of things that I've obviously missed, like that beetroot there. They never really produced good bulbs this year, so it's probably not surprising I've missed one or two. Plenty of Nerf bullets. Not sure if those of you with kids also grow Nerf bullets in your gardens, but yeah, we always seem to have quite a few laying around. In fact, there's quite a few in this area here. And then moving on into this garden bed here, I've done a bit of clearing out of some of the weeds in this one recently. I need to add a bit more manure in here. If you saw my recent soil testing video, you'd see that even though I thought the organics were fairly good in this area, once I actually had it tested, I really need more. So I've got quite a bit of sheep poo at the moment under our wood area, and I'm going to dig up some of that, or scrape up some of that I should say, pop it in here and try and improve this soil a bit before we do our summer planting. So I'm just going to kind of rest most of this bed. But I do have, as you can see here, my snow peas doing really well at the moment. And yeah, hopefully we'll get a nice crop of snow peas this year, because I am really looking forward to doing some more fermented snow peas. Continuing on, well, that looks pretty, doesn't it? few building materials. That's because we had to do a bit of a fix of our greenhouse. You might have seen in some of our videos we were having a bit of a issue with some of the panels that had blown out in this greenhouse. Now, this greenhouse here has been amazing over the years, I will say, even though we did have those blowouts recently. We've probably had it for a good decade or so. It's a Grow Fresh one, and it has held up to some absolutely amazing winds. Like, we've had some incredible storms here over the years. There was an event that we had where there was about 30 of these really big gum trees that fell down. In fact, this area at the back of our property here, where it looks like a bit of a nice paddock now, at a time that actually had a lot of trees in it, and when we had this really big event, they kind of all fell over and it looked like pickup sticks, and it was quite a big effort to get all of that cleaned up. It actually has taken quite a few years, and we're still burning through some of the wood from all those years ago now in our wood fire. So this has held up beautifully. However, we've still got a few materials and things around that I need to clean up, so it's not the prettiest thing at the moment. And if we go inside, you can see that we have kind of done a bit of a hack job, bought a bit of plastic at the back here as opposed to one of the proper panels, because I haven't actually been able to find the proper size panel. That one that was on the side that you just saw, we got from Bunnings. We thought that would fit. It wasn't quite the right size, so we've got to do a bit more hunting. And this is kind of our temporary fix at the moment, where we've siliconed in a bit of just kind of flexible plastic that we've got from our local hardware store. That seems to be doing the trick for now. Now, in our greenhouse at the moment, you probably can see things are absolutely chockers. And that's because up here in the Dandenong Ranges, it gets really, really cold in the wintertime. And to overwinter a lot of our plants, we have to bring them in here. So we've got our capsicums and a lot of our chilies. So we've got a whole different heap of different types of chilies in here. They are getting to the stage where I need to start cutting them back. I haven't done so yet. I really need to get onto that, because you can see that some of the really cold nights have started affecting some of these. Others are handling it a little bit better, but they do need to be cut back a bit even in here in the greenhouse just to safely overwinter them. So all the chilies are in here, all of the capsicums. I've got this chili plant here that I got from the Green Thumb artist, and that one I'm trying to winter for the first time as well. Lemongrass, even coriander's really growing strong in here at the moment, so I'm just picking directly from the growing in this little tray. And a whole bunch of cuttings that I've taken, some very recently, and you might notice I popped up a little kind of short video on some cuttings that I'd taken of things like lemon verbena. I have had a go at doing some of the dahlias as well. I don't think they're going to take, I just don't think they were green enough in the shoots that I took those cuttings from. They had really started dying back, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I don't think it's going to go so well. Also a whole bunch of herbs that I bought recently, probably at a terrible time. I had bought them to go out the front, but it's just probably a little bit too cold for such small tender plants, so I thought I'd pop them in here, and they are absolutely going great in here and really taking off. And I've got a few of my carnivorous plants in here as well. Actually, probably more so, I should say, hubby's carnivorous plants, because he enjoys growing those ones and has always thought they're a great thing to have here in the greenhouse. I've got a new addition that, again, I bought at a terrible time, but I got excited when I saw it at the nursery, and this one's a dragon fruit. So I'm going to give that a bit of a go if I can get that through the winter up here. A few more cuttings, and I really need to get these quince into the ground. I'll do that next spring, and some of these little fig cuttings as well. So that, oh, hang on, and there is one more thing in here, and that's this empty pot. And that was the ginger, the last of the ginger that I've been trying to grow very unsuccessfully. And yep, I've killed the rest. And that is pretty much everything we've got going on in the greenhouse at the moment. But I will say, up here in the Dandenongs, this greenhouse is an absolute godsend. I could not in any way grow all the things that we do up here and keep them alive through our winter unless I had this. Oh, including our sweet potatoes, which I will be harvesting soon. All right, let's keep having a bit of a gander around the rest of the garden. So here's a bit more of the raised garden bed. Actually, there is one thing I've planted in here recently, and that is some spring onions. Thought I'd try and get a few more spring onions going. Marigolds, they just pop up wherever they want now throughout the garden, which I definitely don't mind. And more of the flowers. Spinning around, we've got our garlic crop. So in here, we've got all of our garlic plants. Let's go in and have a bit of a closer look. We planted those back in March, and they're all growing really well so far. Extremely good germination rate, which is not surprising because we've actually had the same garlic that we just plant year on year. We reserve our own garlic cloves and bulbs so that we can split those, replant them for the next year. So they're really well and truly acclimatized to this area now, and we always get an amazing crop of garlic. I don't think we've bought garlic for quite a few years now. Next over here we have our ground cherries or Chinese gooseberries, and these have been a really interesting learning for me this year because I'd never grown them before. This is the first time I've grown them, and I actually thought these were an annual when I put them in, and I have since learned that they are not. They are wonderfully productive with these little fruits. I'd never tried one of these fruits until this year, until we grew these, and they are so delicious, like little kind of tropical tomatoes. What I need to work out though is whether I keep all of these in the garden or whether I try and transplant some now that I understand that these are perennials. They will probably shade a lot of this area here, and this is one of my kind of premium growing beds because where the greenhouse is here, that is kind of a north wall, and it gives a little bit of protection to this garden here. And that means that, you know, it's always been quite a good one for growing tomatoes and things like that. So I don't really want something that's going to cause any shading as the sun moves across the sky. So I may move those, and I do have another little spot in mind for them. And I have a lot. So if I kind of toggle around in this garden bed, I also planted a lot because I didn't realize that they were perennials, but I also didn't realize how big they were going to get as well. So this garden bed here is also full of these delicious little fruit, which I don't want to lose because they are wonderful, but I definitely don't need quite so many plants, and definitely not in all these spots. Now looking at this garden bed here, this is the one where we had our dahlias, and we also had our peonies. I think there was a couple of other little flowers I had in the middle here as well. It's obviously not looking that pretty at the moment because they've all died back. I do need to cut all of that back as well, and also just need to do a bit more research on pulling out the rhizomes of those. So yeah, it's not something I've done before. This was the first time kind of growing flowers in this bed like this. So this one's all a bit of a learning for me. What else have I got in here? I've also got my broad beans. So this is one lot of the broad beans that I've planted in this patch here. Moving around, I also have a few more broad beans over here next to the biogas. I'm leaving this bed fairly empty. I've got a few of our parsley that just kind of pops out there year on year. I actually thought I was going to lose that last year because we had quite a bit of flooding around the place, and that little corner of this garden bed did actually flood out and was inundated quite a bit. So I was really pleased when that parsley came back again. But other than that, what I've done in this bed is I have put a lot of our homemade compost in there, manure in there. We've covered it up with a bunch of our straw. So that one is the kind of sugarcane mulch type straw. And yeah, I'm leaving that as well as a lot of the areas in this bed here as well. And then they'll be hopefully nice and ready for planting in the summertime. In the little tub here, a few lettuces, and I've also got seedlings that I've been starting in these Mr. Stackies. So a few kind of flowers, lettuces in there as well. And in the bottom, I think there's actually some celery, so I'll probably have to transplant that because that definitely won't go so well in the Mr. Stacky. It's just too small an area for something quite so big. So that's pretty much our area at the moment in our kitchen garden. I'm going to take you now for a bit of a wander to the orchard. Oh, and on the way, oh yeah, wet and muddy. We've got our raspberry canes, which are all starting to die back now. They'll need a bit of a prune out of just a few of the canes, because we did transplant into here I think it was just over maybe 18 months or so ago. So that means a lot of these canes are kind of the first year's canes that are the ones that will produce fruit next year. But there are the ones that fruited this year that I'll be cutting out soon. And that'll be good for thinning out this area as well. Now this is one of those areas that isn't looking so pretty at the moment. Like, the reality is, in winter, as I said right at the start, things aren't always the prettiest in our garden. That's just the reality. Here I've got a whole bunch of things that I've been kind of cutting and pulling. The really thick stuff, I need to run that through our mulcher before I chuck it into our compost bay. So that's why it's all kind of sitting here, and it's obviously been sitting here for a little while waiting for me to get to it. But in saying that, I need to also do a bit of chopping of our grapevines, which are the ones kind of over here, this run, which I should show you a bit more of one of these days in one of these videos, but they do need to be pruned back at this time of the year. So I'll probably pull out the mulcher on one day, do all of those, and do all of this at the same time. Actually, the other thing that I will need to do at that time is all of this here, which is our asparagus. So at this time of the year, the asparagus all kind of dies off, and once it's all died off, we can get right in there, kind of snip it off at the base, and yeah, it'll pretty much be a bare bed. And then when the spring comes, you get the shoots that pop up, and that's what you chop off and eat as the yummy, delicious asparagus that you are familiar with from the shops. If you haven't grown it before, it is an amazing plant to have in your garden. It just keeps giving and giving year after year, and we get some beautiful, beautiful crops of delicious asparagus. It's so good. When it grows fresh, you can just kind of snap it off and eat it directly from the garden. But yeah, there's definitely a bit of a piece of work to do here to cut all of that back. Oh, there's one of the ducks over there doing their job. All right, let's keep moving around. These beds here are all pretty empty at the moment. This one had more of kind of like the dahlias and peonies. I did have some other things in there as well. It probably didn't do the greatest, so I think I need to do a little bit more work on the soil in there. Yeah, I'm also wondering if I put them in a little too early and things got a bit wet and I actually killed off some of the rhizomes. So that's an area I'll probably pay a bit more attention to if I want to do some flowers in here again next year. And these ones here I've been putting compost in, same over here, and just trying to get that soil good again for this upcoming summer growing season. Actually, speaking of compost, we didn't have a close look at what's going on in here. I've got a couple of bays. I've just recently thrown in a whole bunch of our sheep poop. So it's going to be really organic stuff once that's all broken down properly. This one here needs quite a bit of work. It's probably more of a mound of weeds and old plants at the moment than it is actual, composting material. All right, moving on. I need to put in another kiwi fruit here, and that's because we had some losses of some of the kiwi fruit. In fact, you can probably see the one behind it has died off, and of course all the ones that we lost were females, so we've been busily trying to get some females back in. Up here we've got our potato bed. These potatoes have been in for years and years now. We just kind of lift from there and then let them keep coming back. I did at one time, and this is probably going back a decade or so in these gardens, try to plant potatoes in different spots and then move them around kind of year on year. But I found they were kind of getting weedy. Like, I was just getting potatoes that I could not get rid of in my other garden areas. So that's why I've got this dedicated spot now, which obviously needs a bit of weeding. These guys, nice and busy. Now in this area we've got all of our fruit trees. I need to do a bit of work on this net because that's come loose last night. We had an amazing event last night where there was just a heap of wind, and we do get these really big wind events up here in the Dandenong Ranges. And yes, we actually had quite a bit of activity at the front of our house last night where there was emergency services kind of pulling down a very large gum tree that was falling towards the power lines. Thankfully the authorities were on that pretty quick, but that means things like this net have come loose, and I'm going to take that off completely today because I don't need that anymore. The apple tree underneath has now lost all of its leaves. I did try to get it off a bit earlier, but the leaves were kind of popping through in a lot of places and making it quite difficult for me to get off myself, so I wasn't able to, but now I definitely can. Hello. So spinning back around, there's a different view of our asparagus that, as I mentioned, we need to prune out. Another spot where I had one of our dahlias. Our little wine barrel that we did have some water plants in have actually all died off, so I need to give this a good clean out. I probably also need to do a bit of work on the barrel itself. We basically lined this with plastic probably about a decade ago, I reckon. And you can see that it's a little worse for wear, even though it's holding a bit of water. It's one of those projects that I'll probably get to one day. I'm just not sure where that day will come because things are just always so hectic and busy. More fruit trees. So you can see they've all kind of largely lost their leaves now. There's a few hanging on the apple tree here. Got a bit of competition from the duck quacking in the background there. Olive trees at the back there. Still yet to get an olive. Like, those trees there have to be now, I'm actually thinking they're probably around 14 years old. And I am still yet to get an olive off of those. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong with those. Yeah, if you've got any tips on actually getting olives off of olive trees, that would be amazing. Strawberries, we've still got them here growing in both the wheelbarrow and the little watering can. I've showed you the video of how we now grow them in our Mr. Stacky on the deck, and I will show you the ones on the deck and how they're going. It's probably more of an aesthetic thing now that we're kind of leaving them here. I like the way this looks in the garden. But yeah, we don't harvest an awful lot of the strawberries off of this just purely because the bugs get to them first. All right, continuing to move on. Oh, pick that up. That's one of the little hangy things that we pop up in the trees to try and deter the birds. I think they laugh at it more than anything. They aren't particularly effective. But oh, jeez, I can't even get it back on the tree. That's all right. I will put it on the table. Yeah, not particularly effective around here. The birds are absolutely voracious. It's my little sitting spot, which is kind of quite unused at the moment because it's just been so cold and so wet out here. But what's really cool is around it, all of my little tulips are all starting to pop up. So the tulips, and there's also some daffodils in some of these as well. And these ones here have just kind of been left in place and just pop up year on year, which is wonderful. They do get knocked over every so often by kids, and Sky, our dog that recently passed, she was also very good at knocking them over. So yeah, I do need to top up a couple of these. Again, another one of those jobs in the garden that I just need to get to. Possums have been busy in the garden working on our lemons. I don't know why or how they managed to do it, but jeepers, they're really good at kind of stripping off those skins and leaving what I'd consider to be the good bit of the lemon behind. Scarecrow here is a bit of a sentimental guy to us. He has been in our garden since our kids were like really little, like as toddlers. They'd come out here and kind of bobble Scarecrow's head. So even though he's had a bit of a hard life and his head falls off every so often, yeah, because this was an area we used to sit and the kids used to play quite a lot when they were tiny, he's a bit of a sentimental guy that I'll try and hold on to for as long as he will remain in our garden and not completely fall apart. Yeah, so aside from that, more fruit trees in the orchard area here. A few flowers. But yeah, it's all looking a little bare in this area of the garden at the moment. Oh, actually, I should show you my blackberries. Actually, if you haven't seen Daz's videos from what's that? My Aussie Garden and Kitchen, his videos are definitely well worth a watch, and he has just shared in one of his most recent videos his blackberries and kind of how he takes cuttings of those really successfully. He, similarly to me, is growing a thornless and kind of non-invasive variety. He has a different one to the one that I'm growing here. The one I'm growing is called a Waldo blackberry, and I got these from the Diggers Club many, many years ago. As you can see, I'm in a super sensitive environment right on the edge of the Aussie bush here. And yeah, despite that, these guys have always kind of remained in this area. And I haven't had any issues with them kind of becoming invasive and having any problems around the garden. Because of that weather event last night, I actually popped a lot of our Mr. Stackies against the wall. And that was just to afford them a bit of protection against those winds. The last thing I wanted was any risk of these pots going over, because those winds were absolutely extreme. And that's one of the things I love about these, is that I can just wheel them around and get them into a safe spot if I need to. And then I can wheel them back out and then pop them back out in the sun, also when I need to. So I'll get this one out as well. You can see I'm growing a lot of the greens up here at the moment. These are a great way to do the greens because the bugs aren't up here and competing for them. I've got lots of, what have I got in here at the moment? The lettuces, and I've also got a bunch of coriander in here as well. And they are all wonderfully healthy. And this is another one that I've started recently, so this one's still looking pretty sparse at the moment. But I've got a few violas in there, some spring onions, and I've also grabbed some of the runners of our strawberries from the wheelbarrow garden, and I've popped them in here, and they're all starting to take off wonderfully. And hopefully, before I know it, they'll start to look like this one as well, which is absolutely magnificent. I love this one. Herbs, which I'm going to need to cut back. This one's oregano. It's all kind of gone to seed. Thyme, sage in there as well. Oh, there's something exciting down there that I haven't shown you guys yet. And that is a couple of new additions I've had recently. Probably not showing up too well on the camera from up here, but that is some limes, finger limes, the Australian limes. So that'll be exciting to see if they grow. I've got them kind of behind the glass to give them a little bit of protection, because I have successfully killed some in the past. So this is going to be kind of like the final go at growing those. And then here I've got my veggie pod, and things are looking really good in the veggie pod at the moment. In fact, I've probably left a couple of these bok chow a little too long. Starting to get some going to flower. I have pulled out now a lot of the basil. That's kind of the last one hanging on, but I have put in some new seed. So I've got some little bok chow seedlings and little lettuces that have popped up as well. And I've still got a little bit of my rocket remaining in here too. Out the front here is our edible garden. We've got this raised bed kind of area right at the front. You can see here some remnants of that rain last night. Now this area here, we had a beautiful kind of herb garden bed in here. It got absolutely inundated in all that kind of really bad weather and flooding associated with that La Nina event last year, and we lost most of our plants in here. And that's why I've now got all of these pots in place to raise things up. And I've also put in some banana plants, and that was actually on a recommendation from someone that said that bananas could deal with a bit of inundation. So I am hoping that these guys will survive the winter. They were all pups off of a pot of bananas that I have here, so I'm hoping that that advice will be kind of accurate, that they can handle wet feet for part of the year and that they will grow well. But yeah, so far having these pots is doing the job and keeping these plants out of the super wet ground for the other types of plants that I have here. I'm kind of looking above this area. I've been fighting a lot of weeds through this zone here, so that's why I've got all of this kind of cardboard down at the moment, and that's all kind of breaking down. And see, even though we're on a really big slope here, it's super wet ground. And that does cause problems for a lot of plants in this kind of zone here. I have done a full walk around our front garden, which is our edible garden area, in the past. So you might want to have a bit of a look at that one if you want to hear a bit more about everything that we've got out here and why we've got what we've got in certain spots. But yeah, at the moment, things are looking quite bare on all of our fruit trees. That's our persimmon there, which has got nothing on it. Things like our quinces and apricots, cherries, even our big fig tree, if I move along. They all are looking fairly bare. And we're just starting to get a few bulbs pop up in our flower wheelbarrow. Blueberries have all lost their flowers as well. Herbs like the rosemary are doing quite well. Chokeberries, again, they've lost all their leaves. Our flower garden area doesn't really have a lot of flowers at the moment. Moving up the driveway, at the moment it's all about citrus. So we've got grapefruit, lemons, and hiding under this net here, because we get a lot of competition from bats and also from all of the birds in this area, is our mandarins. And our mandarins are going absolutely crazily amazingly at the moment. They have been picked, and despite that, you can see there's still heaps on here. I've taken some to our Dandenong Collective swap group to swap with others. I've given some to friends and family. I've turned it into a beautiful fermented soda. First time I'd tried mandarins fermented soda after someone had suggested that to me, so that was a wonderful suggestion. Thank you. What else have we done? We've also preserved a bunch for the freezer, and I've popped up a video showing how we did that. Yeah, and just eaten so many. They're great for the lunch boxes, these ones. These are the Satsuma variety. If you haven't grown those, they are a really good one to choose. Peel nice and easy, really thin skins, and seedless variety as well. Now, getting hung up on our roses here. You can probably see I need to do some chopping of the roses. It's getting to that time of the year, they definitely need a prune. Probably going to need to prune our fig tree again. We chopped that right back last year. In fact, you can kind of see the stumps here on where we chopped it back to. And despite that really hard prune, if I move right back, you can see how much that has actually grown up and grown back. They definitely respond really well to the hard prune. What else have we got? More olive feijoa. We only got a few off that because the birds were really into the flowers this year, and that meant we didn't really get a lot of feijoas actually forming on the plant. Yeah, I think that's pretty much most of the things that I wanted to bring you out today and show you in the garden. As you can see, it's not the prettiest time of the year, but that's just the reality of gardening in the winter in the Dandenong Ranges. You know, there's little areas of beauty. In fact, here's one. Like some of those flowers that are starting to pop up at this time of year. You know, those pops of colour from the citrus as well. You can see some of the spring bulbs are just starting to pop up in here as well. There's definitely the promise of a lot of colour and beauty to come. And of course, all of these fruit trees, once spring hits, will be covered in blossoms, and they will continue to produce lots of yummy fruit for us. And as you can see, we're spending a lot of time in that kitchen garden area. Not so much growing the winter crops, but for us it's really about kind of preparing the soil for that year ahead. So hopefully you've enjoyed hearing all about our winter garden and seeing the realities of what it looks like at the moment. Definitely wasn't all pretty, but yeah, it's our garden at this time of year. So hopefully you enjoyed this walk around the garden. Thanks for joining, and catch you later.